Okay, let's start by the prayers and spending a bit of time checking our motivation and trying to have as positive a motivation as we can for being here tonight. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, with the next prayer, the Four Measurables, we'll just read one line at a time and pause for a short time after each line so that we can contemplate the meaning and try to generate that particular immeasurable thought in our mind. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and anger that hold some close and others distant. And then the 7-limb prayer. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. Okay, so we recite this prayer to the Buddha one time and then the mantra several times. And if you wish to, and you can, imagine the Buddha in front of you, made of light, blissful, and full of compassion and love for you and all living beings. And you can imagine light and nectar flowing from the Buddha's heart into you and all other living beings, and purifying all of our negative energy and filling us up with positive energy to help us quickly attain all the realizations of the path. Lama tumba chomdende deshin shekpa da chomba yang takpa dzogbe sangye gyawa shakya tupala chad salo choto kyapsu chi wo. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Soha. 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 So now let's sit quietly for a few minutes, and you can meditate on the breath to help yourself calm down, or meditate on something else that you might wish to, like the attitude of loving kindness, compassion, altruism, wishing to learn the Dharma, follow the path, become enlightened to help all living beings. So try to use this time to put yourself into a positive state of mind in case it isn't already, or to enhance the positive state of mind that's already there. So I made a slideshow for tonight because I noticed that it seems not many people have the notes that I'm sending out. And so I just thought there's a lot of information. It might be helpful to is it this one? Niels, is it this one?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you need to turn off the lights. I'm going to be talking part of the time, and I just put some of the information on slides. Just okay. So we're starting a new module tonight. We finished the last module. Last module was on the two truths. So we spent about a month, a bit more than a month on that. And I don't know if you noticed, but I didn't manage to get through all the material that I put on the notes. I was a bit, what's the word? Ambitious. So I put a lot of material in the notes, but we didn't quite have time to cover it all. So, but I think we covered the most important points. And also the two truths is a really big topic. There's a book called The Two Truths by an American scholar, Guy Newland, and it's about this big. And it's mostly talking about just the Madhyamika Prasangika view of the two truths, not going into the other schools. So it's a big topic. So I think it wasn't, we couldn't expect to go through everything there is to say about the two truths. But so we just kind of had a brief look at it. And as time goes on, as you study more and more, then you'll gain more understanding of this topic. I need to study it myself more. There's a lot I don't understand. So now we're starting a new module. What's happening? It's on, huh? So this module I've called Mind and Its Potential. Did I have it in the wrong place?
No.
Should be in there. And there's also a Discovering Buddhism module, which is called Mind and Its Potential. I don't know if any of you have done this. Have any of you done Discovering Buddhism? There we go. But what I'm in this module, part of this program, Exploring Buddhist Philosophy, I'm going to be talking about it in a somewhat different way, using different material, different readings, different articles to talk about the mind and its potential. So even if you did the one in Discovering Buddhism, you might learn something new here. Anyway, it doesn't hurt to hear the same things over and over again. So let's first look at how this module connects with the previous one. So one way they connect is because in the previous module, we were looking at the different Buddhist schools. We went from the Vibhashika and the Sutrantika, then the Chittamatra, Madhyamika, and how they explain the two truths. And the last two schools, the Chittamatra and the Madhyamika, when it comes to explaining reality, how things exist, the mind plays a very important role. Like in the Chittamatra school, they say that everything we see is just projected by our mind. It's coming from our mind. There's no external reality, no world out there. It's all just our mind projecting things. And then Madhyamika doesn't agree with that on the whole. But still, they say that mind is very important. It plays a very important role in what we see, what we experience, you know, how things exist. Because for example, Madhyamika Prasangika says everything is just imputed by the mind, just labeled, imputed, named, designated by the mind. So the mind plays a very, very important role in the world, in ourself, our own self, our body, our mind, all the other people and things in the world around us. So all of these things are dependent on the mind and not independent of the mind. Because mind is so important, then it makes sense to look more carefully at the mind. What is this thing? What is this mind, which is so important? And the mind is also very important in the Pali tradition, or we could call it the Theravada tradition. For example, this is a famous quotation that comes at the beginning of a text called the Dhammapada. Have you read the Dhammapada? It's a text that's very popular in the Theravada tradition. They also have it in the Tibetan tradition, but I don't think it's so well known. But it's like the Dhammapada is a collection of sayings of the Buddha. So these are the first two verses of the Dhammapada, and it talks about the importance of the mind. Mind is the forerunner of all evil or bad, negative, whatever conditions. Mind is chief, and they are mind-made. If with an impure mind one speaks or acts, then pain follows one, even as the wheel follows the hoof of the ox. So when there's an ox pulling a cart, a wagon, then the wheel just moves in accordance with the movement of the ox. So in the same way, if we act or speak with a negative mind, an impure mind, then what comes as a result of that naturally is suffering, pain. And then the second verse says pretty much the same thing, but with regard to good things. So if we act with a pure mind, speak or act with a pure mind, the result will be happiness. Happiness follows one just like a shadow. You know, wherever we go, we're outside in the sunlight, wherever we go, our shadow follows us. So this also points to the importance of the mind in terms of our experiences. Mind is the creator. There's lots of quotations in the Buddhist sutras about that. Buddhism doesn't accept the existence of an external creator like most theistic religions. You say God or Allah or Brahma or whatever, some deity who's the creator of the world and all of us and everything. So Buddhism doesn't agree with that. Buddhism says the creator of everything is actually the mind. Mind is the creator of all our experiences. So it's important to know about the mind. What is this thing? Which is the creator of everything. Okay, so that's one way we can connect the previous module and this module, just the importance of the mind in terms of reality and what exists and what doesn't exist. Another way the previous module connects with this one is in terms of the two truths. We were looking at the two truths in the last module. And according to the Prasangika school, the school that most of the Tibetans follow, everything has two natures, conventional and ultimate. So the two truths, conventional truth and ultimate truth, are said to be like two aspects of everything that exists. Whatever exists has a conventional nature, conventional way of existing, and it also has an ultimate nature, an ultimate way of existing. And so this is true for everything. It's also true for the mind. So the mind has these two natures. One is a conventional nature. So the conventional nature of the mind is clear and knowing, or cognizing, some prefer. And then there's the ultimate nature of the mind, and that is its emptiness, emptiness of inherent existence. So in this module, last module, we were kind of talking more about emptiness. This module, we're going to be focusing more on the conventional nature of the mind being clear and knowing. So there might be different definitions of the mind, but the one that's used in our school, the Gelugpa school, is this. It's mere clarity and awareness. So in the notes that I put up on the website, have any of you seen them? Yeah?
No, we couldn't find them.
So you have to go all the way down to the bottom, third module.
Yeah,
Module 3?
I did, but I couldn't find them. I found them actually 2 days ago, but today I couldn't find them.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Someone said in.
Yeah. It's kind of weird.
Okay. Well, if you give me your email address, I can email them to you.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, so the notes, there's a set of notes for this module, and the notes that are there on the website, or should be on the website, they might be the only notes that we're using. So it's a bit extensive, and it contains 2 main articles. One is an explanation of the mind from Alex Berzin. Have you heard of Alex Berzin? He's one of the first Westerners to get involved with Tibetans and Tibetan Buddhism. He's a scholar, actually, from Harvard.
He was here?
Yeah. Okay, good. Maybe a long time ago.
Not that long.
No?
1.5 years.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, he's a scholar, very, very intelligent. He knows Tibetan and Sanskrit and all these languages. He's translated a lot of books and written a lot of books, and he has a website called the Berzin Archives. Anyway, there's a book called The Gelug Khargyu Tradition of Mahamudra, and it's mainly teachings given by His Holiness the Dalai Lama on Mahamudra, and translated by Alex. He translated it, and in the beginning of this book, there's a kind of, as a preface, an explanation of the mind, and he goes into this definition and explains each part of it very nicely. It's the most fantastic explanation I've ever come across, because often my experience is that the lamas just say, what is mind? Mind is mere clarity and awareness. And then they go on to the next thing. But it's like, well, what does that mean? So there's this wonderful explanation in that book by Alex Berzin. So I've extracted that and put that in the notes. And I'm just going to cover the main points tonight. So tonight's topic is mainly looking at this definition. And hopefully we'll have time at the end to do some meditation on it, try to get a bit more firsthand experience of it. So in the beginning of the article, has anyone read it? Yeah. He talks about some problems in translating words from like Sanskrit or Tibetan into English or other languages, and how, we come up with these words in our own language, like mind. Mind is the word we usually use in English. What do you use in Danish for mind? Sind. Okay.
Like this too.
Hmm?
Like there's sometimes consciousness, sometimes mind.
Yeah,
Those kind of
consciousness.
interchangeable.
Consciousness is another term that's often used. But it's, even in Tibetan and Sanskrit, they have many, many different words for mind. They don't have just one word, they have many words. And sometimes the words are synonymous. Sometimes they have just little bit subtle differences. It's a rather complex subject. It's also very interesting. So anyway, he points out some of the difficulties. with translating, because, for example, the word mind that we use in English, for many people in the West, it only refers to the intellect, you know, the thinking aspect. Whereas the term in Sanskrit and Tibetan, he was talking about the word chitta, is the Sanskrit term, or sem in Tibetan. That's, you know, one of the words for mind. It doesn't only include the intellect, it includes all of our experiences, perceptions, as well as emotions. Because sometimes in the West, we make this distinction between the intellect and emotions, the mind and the heart, thinking and feeling, almost like they're two separate things. Yeah? But in Sanskrit, Tibetan, in Buddhism, we should say, that's not the case. So the term mind, or what we're translating, the term like chitta or sam, which we are translating as mind, includes all of our conscious experiences. It not just thought, but also feelings, emotions, perceptions, many, many, many different things. So he's just making the point that we shouldn't stick to the understanding we may have about these words from the Western philosophy or Western science. Instead, we need to have a flexible mind. We need to give our mind flexible and come to a new understanding of these terms. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's why it's good to go through the definition of the mind and really try to understand what it means. And he mentioned the word experience. English word experience might be a good translation, but then that has its problems as well. That has its limitations. So whatever word we come up with in the English language, or possibly other languages, you know, it might not fully cover all the meanings of the Tibetan and Sanskrit terms. So anyway, keep an open mind with regard to these. Okay, so then so this definition, then I put the word mere in parentheses because that isn't always included. Sometimes the definition only has the last two words, clarity and awareness, or some prefer the word knowing rather than awareness, clarity and knowing, or clear and knowing. So different translators use different terms. So sometimes it's good to learn the Tibetan, you know, go back to the source. Okay, so, but anyway, we will talk about the term mirror because it is included in his explanation. So then he goes into these terms one by one, starting with clarity. So this word, clarity, or cell in Tibetan, can be explained in different ways. And I personally like this explanation of Geshe Rabten and other teachers as well explain clarity in this way. Clarity refers to the non-material or space-like nature of consciousness, i.e. it's being completely devoid of color, shape, form, or material dimension. So mind, as understood in Buddhism, is a non-physical phenomena. It doesn't have any physical properties. So it's quite different from the body. Our body is made of physical matter, cells, molecules, atoms, and so on, little particles. So it has physical properties, color, shape, size, weight, and so on. Whereas the mind is not at all physical. So it's not made of physical material. So it doesn't have any physical properties, color, shape, form, size, weight, and so forth. It's totally non-physical. This is the Buddhist explanation. And so, you know, if you're dealing with Buddhism, Buddhist teachers, Buddhist practitioners, this is their understanding of the mind. So it's not the brain or a part of the brain or a product of the brain. It's a different kind of phenomena, non-physical, non-material. So that's one explanation of the term clarity, which is part of the definition of the mind. But Alex has a different explanation, which is he goes into quite a bit of in his article. He says the term clarity means giving rise to. The mind always gives rise to something. Its object. Mind gives rise to an object and is clear about it, in other words, or it makes it clear. Now, I don't fully understand this explanation, but anyway, I'm sharing it with you. It's something to think about, something to try to understand. And in his article, he also says this term clarity, we shouldn't think that, the mind is some kind of light in our head that has, different intensities. Rather, it's the action or occurrence of the action of being clear about something or making something clear. So he describes the mind as being more like an event, a happening, something that happens. So mind arises, because another thing about the mind we need to understand, it's not like a thing that's sitting inside of us. We might imagine that somewhere inside of us we have this thing called mind, and it's sitting in there and it's thinking and seeing and having all these different experiences. So it's not like that. We need to throw away that kind of idea.
This is how people think of the brain. I think
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a misknowing of what they think that is. They think the brain is what everything is happening.
Yeah.
Being perceived by.
Yeah. So mind is actually something that's arising and passing, arising and passing, arising and passing every moment. It's a flow rather than, a constant, unchanging thing that's sitting there inside of us. So it's more that, in each moment there's some new experience happening, new mental state arising, and it lasts just a moment and then it's gone. So it's like that.
May I clarify? When you have this definition of like a space-like nature, then it has the connotation of that it's not the object of the mind. So when you have something arising, thoughts, feelings, color or shapes and all of these things, then it's not the mind.
Well, this
And
is something coming later about how mind always has an object.
Yeah,
Whenever there's a mind, there's always an object of the mind. So there's always two things there. There's the mind that is the knower, the experiencer, the subject, and then its object.
Okay, yeah.
So there are two things, but they are said to be non-dual. But that's coming a little bit later. Yeah? Yeah. Is that okay? And the thing about being space-like, I think, I can't be sure what Geshe Rapton meant when he said that. But I think it just means space-like in the sense that it's not a physical thing,
Immaterial.
not a solid. Yeah, it's immaterial.
Well,
Well,
it's like the thought is like a mental object arising before the mind.
the thought is a
Like
mental.
a thought is a sense object of a mental sense of a mind that cognizes the object.
Well, we're going to later in the article, in the notes, we're going to go into two main types of mind: perception and conception. Perception is like when we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and so forth. So that's one type of experience. And another type of experience is conception or thought. So there's a very clear difference between those two states of mind. So that's something that'll come a little bit later. First, we're just trying to understand the mind itself in a general way, whether it's conception or perception, whether it's thought or seeing. All states of mind have these qualities. So we're trying to understand that.
point about being pervasive.
No, I didn't. You did.
I made the point. No. I made the point, but you said and I was wondering what that means.
But what did you say?
The mind,
Yeah,
is all pervasive.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Well, if it's space-like, it has no boundaries. So space, like uncompiled space, has no boundaries. It has no.
So would you say the mind is in this table?
No.
There's mind in this table?
But my mind is able to. It has no limit of perception, of being able to perceive any object.
Mind, well, that's debatable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
So I could bring my mind to that table, yes, but still have to bring it.
well, the different schools of Buddhism would have a different explanation about what is actually happening when we perceive an object like the table.
Mm.
When we have an experience of seeing a table, what's actually going on there. But this is something that'll come later if you guys can hang on. We're still trying to, yeah. So it's a really interesting subject. What is the mind and what is going on with the mind? And anyway, this is Alex's explanation of the term clarity. And he says the way he's interpreting the term clarity is because he says it's similar to the word for rising of the sun. You know, when the sun rises, when they say that in Tibetan, the term for rising of the sun is similar to the rising of an object in the mind. So, but still we have to understand what's actually going on there. Actually, there's one analogy that's used to explain how the mind perceives an object, and that is like a mirror. You know, if you have a mirror, and then if you put an object in front of the mirror, or you stand in front of the mirror will take on an image of the object in front of it. So they say our mind works in a similar way. Our mind is similar to a mirror, not exactly the same, but similar to a mirror in that it can take on a kind of, they use the word aspect, but it's like a reflection. The mind takes on a reflection of objects. So when there's visual objects in front of our eyes, mind takes on a kind of aspect of these objects, and at the same time knows them, experiences them. Because a mirror, you know, a mirror takes on a reflection of the object, but a mirror doesn't experience. A mirror doesn't have awareness or consciousness or knowing. A mirror doesn't know what is reflected in it, but the mind does. So the mind, like the mirror, takes on a reflection or an aspect of objects, and at the same time knows, experiences, is aware of those objects. And they say this is actually how our mind knows objects, by arising in or taking on an aspect of the object. So when we look at the table, when we have a visual experience of the table, what's actually happening is mind arises in this kind of image or aspect or reflection of the table. And at the same time knows it. That doesn't mean the mind becomes a table, okay? It's not like that. Just as like with the mirror, you know, the mirror has a reflection of the table in it, but it isn't that there's actually a table there in the mirror, right? You can't put your cup of coffee on the table, on the reflection of the table in the mirror. But so it's just a reflection. So in the same way, the mind takes on or arises in a reflection of the object, but it doesn't mean that that is like the actual object. It's not a material thing, because mind is always immaterial, non-physical. But anyway, that's how our mind knows an object, at least in terms of visual and audio, you know, the sense objects. So I think that's what Alex is trying to explain here, that, you know, the meaning of clarity is the mind giving rise to an object or arising as the object and is clear about it or makes it clear. But he says that the term clarity could be a little problematic because, for example, we say, we use the term clarity if our mind is clear, you know, and so if you say the mind has clarity as one of its attributes, it sounds like the mind always has to be clear, but that isn't the case because, for example, mind can be very fuzzy, like when we're half asleep, we're not fully awake, not fully alert, you know, our mind can be kind of dull and we can still know things, we can still experience things, but without this very super clear. Okay, does that make sense? Or he also gives the example, if you wear glasses, if you normally wear glasses, you need glasses to be able to see things clearly. So if you take your glasses off, you still see things, but everything looks very fuzzy. So things don't appear clear, but still there is mind there. Okay, so the point he's trying to make is we shouldn't think that because the definition of mind includes this word clarity, that means mind always has to be clear. It always has to have a very clear experience of things. It doesn't. So even if we're looking at things without our glasses and everything's looking very fuzzy and blurry, there's still mind there. We would still say there's mind experiencing things, and it's clear in this sense, but it doesn't mean it's super clear in other senses. Does that make sense? No. But the point he's trying to make is the word clarity, we shouldn't think that means that every single instant, every single experience that we have is super clear. So even if we have a fuzzy experience, you know, we don't see things clearly with our eyes, or mentally, you know, we're fuzzy. We don't really understand, like just now, you know, you didn't understand what I was saying. Okay, so we would still say there's mind there, and mind always has clarity, but the word clarity doesn't mean, you know, you fully understand everything. Does that make sense? So he says this is a little bit of a problem with the term clarity. And another thing is some translators, like Thupten Jinpa, who often translates for His Holiness, use, instead of the word clarity, they use the word luminous. Have you ever heard that? Ever come across that? And I don't understand why they use that word luminous, because the word luminous in English means it's giving off light. You know, like a light bulb is luminous. It's emitting light. So if you say luminous, the mind is luminous, it sounds like it's giving off light, which can't be true because the mind is not a physical thing. So it can't, light is a physical phenomena, right? So how could the mind give off light? So I don't understand why they use that term. Anyway.
I don't know. I was just thinking of the object that the mind arises in the shape of the object,
Mm-hmm.
but like in the aspect of the object, then that sort of that has a radiance, a radiant quality.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, I still don't fully understand, you know, I know the words, I know how to explain it, but to really understand what it means, I don't know. And then there's also the point about in Tantra, this explanation only comes in Tantra, but they say that the most subtle level of the mind is clear light. And that's definitely the word light. There's definitely the word light there. And sometimes they even talk about how there's 5 colored lights. So for me, that's, maybe my mind is too concrete. You know, it's hard to figure out how a mind, which is a non-physical thing, can have light or be light. Anyway, so there's still for me, a lot of mystery about the mind. Okay, so do you have some clarity about this? A little bit. And like I say, for me, the first explanation of clarity from Geshe Rabten is something I can understand better. Still trying to understand the second one, but now that the other main term in the definition is awareness. And this is what one of the things that makes the mind different from a mirror, because a mirror, as I said, takes on a reflection of the object. Mind also takes on a kind of reflection of the object. The mirror doesn't know, doesn't have awareness, consciousness, but mind does. So when it comes to explaining awareness, it's hard. Hard to put it into words, but we know what it is, right? Because it's there all the time. We have awareness every single minute, every single second. There's always some kind of awareness, some kind of consciousness, experiencing, knowing. So I think all we can do is come up with synonyms of awareness, like knowing or experiencing or being aware of. Alex also explains it in this way, and this is, from the text, engages, the mind engages with its object. So that's what's meant by awareness. But Alex points out that using the term awareness can also be a little bit misleading, because mind, if we use the term awareness, it can sound as if mind always has to be fully awake, which isn't the case, because even when we are asleep, fully asleep, or in a coma, mind is still there. Mind is still active and experiencing things, even though it's what we would call this an unconscious state. We say unconscious, we're unconscious, right? When somebody's asleep or in a coma, we say that person is unconscious. So it sounds as if there's no consciousness there. But according to Buddhism, that's not the case. There is always consciousness, even in unconsciousness. So of course, if there's dreaming, like when we're asleep, we can have dreaming, and definitely there's mind. That's mind. That's mind. The mind is dreaming. But even in a state of dreamless sleep, sleep without dreams, Buddhism says our mind is still there, still experiencing something, even if it's just darkness, blackness, blankness. Okay, so mind doesn't have to be conscious. It can be unconscious. And also, it's not necessary for mind to always be fully attentive to things. Like we can, when we're awake, for example, Alex uses the example of having unconscious motivations or unconscious feelings, emotions, like he says, you can be talking to somebody and actually in your mind there's anger or hostility or maybe some, desire or lust going on, but you're not fully aware of that, right? So there's unconscious experiences. So there's still, those experiences are still there, they're still happening, but they're kind of, in psychology, they would say below the level of consciousness. We are unconscious of them. Freud said there's a lot in the unconscious, right? A lot of stuff going on that we're not conscious of. So he's just explaining that the term awareness doesn't mean the mind always has to be fully awake and fully conscious of what's going on. There can be things happening that we're not conscious of. And yeah, so mind is always aware. It always knows. It always experiences. But that doesn't mean it's always fully conscious. And also, it doesn't necessarily have to understand its object. Sometimes we see something and we don't know what that thing is. Or we hear a sound and we don't know what that object is. So it's not necessary for mind to fully understand or fully get the object. And just to make a note, some teachers and translators use other terms for awareness. The term in Tibetan is Rigpa. It's being translated here as awareness, but some translators translate Rigpa as knowing or as cognition. And we have to be careful because in the Dzogchen tradition, the term Rigpa has another meaning.
Okay.
It's very confusing, yeah.
So what's the?
Let's just stick with this now. Because I haven't studied Dzogchen, so I'm just saying in the philosophical, Gelugpa philosophical tradition, which goes back to Dharmakirti and Dignaga, the Indian masters, the term Rigpa, I don't know what the Sanskrit term is. I can look it up. But anyway, the term Rigpa is what is translated here as awareness, knowing, cognition. So they say every single moment of our mind is a Rigpa. Whereas I think in Dzogchen it has another meaning, right? They distinguish Sem and Rigpa. So so we have to differentiate how these terms are used in different traditions.
So in Dzogchen, isn't it that they mean Rigpa is the absolute nature of mind?
I don't know. Is it?
I ask you.
Don't they say Sem is ordinary mind
Yeah.
and Rigpa is
Ultimate mind.
Yeah.
ultimate mind?
And
Yeah.
by
So then it's
Rigpa, that
very
is the
different.
not knowing at all.
Yeah. So that's very different because they say, even when we're confused, even when we're ignorant, even when we have anger and greed and so forth, they're all Rigpa. Because Rigpa simply means knowing, experiencing. So whether you have a good state of mind, even a Buddha, Buddha's enlightened mind is Rigpa, but an ordinary sentient being full of anger and hatred and so on is still Rigpa. So you just have to differentiate how the term is used in different contexts.
So if we talk about this here, so mind is Rigpa and Sem together. Do they exist co-laterally, co-dependently?
Oh, the term Sem. No, actually. Let's put that aside for now, because in the notes, on the very last page of the notes, there's a little kind of chart or diagram that I made. And somewhere back here. Did you see this?
I didn't get that far, but yeah.
Yeah, it's on the very last page. So maybe we leave that till later when we can look at that chart. Okay, so now where are we? Maybe we should have a break now before we go on. Yeah, this is our usual time for having a break.
I have a quick question. So are we not, we're primarily sticking to your notes for this module and articles and different things instead of
Books.
Okay.
Yeah, for this module, this is going to be a short one, maybe just a couple of weeks. And there is a book about the mind, like the mind in Tibetan Buddhism, but that's a really huge look at the mind. And that's actually what comes in the basic program. In the basic program, there's a whole... Oh, that's true. Geshe Tashi has a book called, what's it called? Buddhist Psychology, I think. Yeah, but that's going into all the details of Lorik. So if and when we get to that topic in the basic program, we can use that book. But this is just an introduction to the mind, looking at some of the fundamentals of the mind without going into all of those details, which gets very complicated.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we finished that one. Okay, then there's this term mirror, which comes in some definitions of the mind. So the way Alex explains this term, mirror has a sense of excluding things, and so one way of understanding mirror is mind is merely a cognitive event. It's just giving rise to an object and experiencing it. So it just happens. And he also says it's not necessary for there to be a conscious will. I'm going to see something. Seeing just happens. When the causes and conditions are there, it happens. Seeing happens, hearing happens, thinking happens. As we know very well in meditation, we don't want to think, but all these thoughts are popping up. So they just happen, And so there are different things excluded by the term mirror. We can say it excludes the need for being attentive, understanding, evaluation. He already kind of spoke about that because he said, it's not necessary for the mind to be always fully aware, fully attentive, or even fully conscious. It can be unattentive, it can be unconscious, it can be fuzzy, cloudy, blurry. So there isn't always this sharpness there, but it still happens. And he also says the word mirror can exclude two things. One, the mind being like a machine in our head that sees and thinks and so on. So I mentioned that before. We might have a sense of the mind sitting inside of us somewhere, like a machine, like the brain, like Joseph said, maybe because of this Western habit of thinking about the brain. The brain is the mind, and so we might think of the mind being like that, just something sitting inside of us that's doing all these things, seeing and thinking and so forth. So it isn't like that. So that's one thing excluded by mirror. And another thing is that there is no solid eye that uses the mind to see, think, and so forth. So if you pay attention to your experience, you might notice that, and this happens in language as well. When we say I see, I think, that we have a sense of something that we call I, which does the act of seeing. There's seeing, and then there's an I that sees. There's thinking and an I. I mean, I'm talking about capital I, not this I. An I that thinks. Okay, there's feeling emotions, happiness, unhappiness, and so forth. And an I that is feeling that. And we do this in our language. We do it in our language. We also do it in our conception about ourselves. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now this is actually getting into emptiness here. Emptiness, selflessness. But he's saying the term mirror eliminates that as well. That there isn't such a thing as this separate I or me, myself, that is doing all these doing all these things, seeing and thinking and so forth. There's just seeing, there's just thinking, there's just feeling, just the mind arising in these different states, and not a separate I behind that. Does that make sense?
Mm.
I mean, this is actually very difficult to understand, but this is the Buddhist view. Okay, so
That's difficult to understand, but I feel different. I can understand it.
Mhm.
The feeling.
Yeah, our gut level.
Yeah.
Gut level. How do you say that in Danish? Gut level feeling.
Yeah.
Gut level senses. There is an I there
Yeah.
that is doing all these things. So what's actually happening, how the mind works, how the mind happens is it just happens. Cognitive events, experiences simply happen, arise, occur when there's the causes and conditions that come together. And we're going to look at that more in the next week. We'll look at perception and conception, these two main types of mind and how they occur. What are the causes and conditions for a mental event to come to occur? Whether it's seeing, there are different causes and conditions, whether it's seeing, hearing, and so on, the sense perceptions, or thinking, conceptual, which is the mental consciousness. So there's different causes and conditions giving rise to these mental events. But they just happen. When the causes and conditions are there, they happen. And but Alex says, but it's still okay to use the term I in our language. I mean, it would be kind of weird to go around and just say, see, think, you know, without using the term I. So, I mean, ideally, we want to understand, we want to have the correct understanding that there isn't a real solid, independently existing I there. But when it comes to, you know, being in the world and communicating with other people and so forth, it's okay to use the term I see, I think, and so forth. But we need to try to understand that the I is just something labeled. It's just labeled, merely labeled I. It's just labeled on the experience of seeing and so forth, rather than as a real thing in itself. Okay, so he gives a nice summary at the end of his article. So mind in Buddhism refers to experience, namely the mere arising and cognitive engaging with the contents of experience. And again, there's always content. There's always an object. You can never have mind. You can never have an experience without something that's being experienced. There's always an object there. It could be a visual object. It could be a mental object, but there's always some object that's being experienced. Even when you have an experience of emptiness, when you have a realization of emptiness, direct realization of emptiness, it's said that in that state, your mind seems to merge with the object. You have this non-dual experience, as if your mind and emptiness merge and become one. But there's still, that's how it seems, but there is still a mind and the object, emptiness.
That was the all-pervasive quote. When that happens, when the mind merges with the objects and it's realizing that object directly. I think that's where I meant all-pervasive.
Maybe. I mean, they do say that when you realize, when you have a direct realization of one object, when you have the direct realization of the emptiness of one object, like your eye, then simultaneously you directly realize the emptiness of all objects, because the emptiness of all phenomena is the same. It's the same stuff. So realizing the emptiness of one thing is equivalent to realizing the empty. That's only with direct realization, not with. So it is in a way kind of pervasive. You could say, okay, when you're yogi sitting there directly realizing emptiness, they are realizing the emptiness of every single phenomenon in the universe. So in a way, yeah, you could say their mind is pervading all phenomena. Kind of. And for sure, the Buddha, when they say a Buddha's mind pervades all phenomena, Buddha's mind is omniscient. So Buddha's mind sees everything that exists in the universe at the same time. So a Buddha's mind can pervade all phenomena, but an ordinary being's mind can certainly be very scattered and all over the place at one time, but actually pervade all phenomena. Yeah, so there's always an object, always something that's being experienced. And so this continuity of experience, it's something continuous. It's always flowing and never stops. Mind is always there experiencing something. They call it the mind stream or the mental continuum. They have this term in Tibetan and so on. Another thing is it's always individual, with each moment of experience following from previous moments of experience according to the karmic laws of cause and effect. So this needs to be understood because some people have this idea of a collective consciousness or a cosmic consciousness or a universal consciousness. This idea, I think, exists in some forms of Hinduism, but it's not in Buddhism. Buddhism doesn't believe in such a thing. Instead, each person, each individual person has their own individual stream of mental experiences, and they don't get kind of mixed up and tangled up with each other. Otherwise, Alex says, if there was such a thing as a universal mind, we all have one mind, then if I eat a meal, your hunger should go away. Right? If I'm unhappy, you should also be unhappy. Or you would remember my childhood experiences and I would remember your childhood experiences. But that doesn't happen, right? So I think if we look carefully, we can see that each one of us has our own individual mind stream.
How about the Buddha? He could see everything from there.
Buddha sees everything, yeah. Yeah, I know that when it comes to the Buddha's mind, I think there is some discussion about that. Like when everyone becomes enlightened, when many beings become enlightened, do their minds all merge into one sort of ocean of enlightened mind? But to me, I still have trouble believing that because, like for example, in the Golden Light Sutra, there's a story about the Buddha's previous life when he was the Prince Mahadeva and he gave his body to the tiger, right? So he was, telling that story from his memory. I was that person and I did that and so forth. So he had his own individual memory of his previous lifetimes. And so I think my understanding is, maybe I'm very gross, but different beings are coming from different directions and having different life experiences, and then they're all coming to the state of enlightenment, but they still remember their own previous lives. They still remember, well, 2 million years ago I was there and I did this and that, and the other person says, well, 2 million years ago I was somewhere else and I did something else. So I think to me it seems from that point of view they would still have different.
We could talk about parts. Or if there's one mind, but that mind is made up of parts of mind.
I don't know.
How they interact.
I mean, trying to figure out a Buddha's mind, trying to figure out an enlightened mind, we can't know.
That's the that can't know.
Yeah. So we'll know one day when
We'd
we
like
get
to know,
there.
that's all.
Yeah, one day we'll know that. One day we'll get there.
And then we will say to each other, do you remember 20 years ago sitting here discussing?
Because actually one Buddha would, since a Buddha sees everything, a Buddha would see in every other Buddha's minds. Okay, so if there are different Buddhas, they would be able to see, oh, I can remember, I can see, but it's different seeing somebody else's mind and remembering your own experience. Okay, so I think that would be a different.
If you are, I'm thinking that like the way the Buddha appears to us as like coming golden body like this, it's just a display.
Yeah, the body of the Buddha isn't the real Buddha. It is
Yeah, so
the 4 bodies. There are 4 bodies of a Buddha.
Yeah, so like from the perspective of the mind of the Buddha, I at least heard, is like no different from emptiness.
Well, there's four.
Beyond characteristics.
Well, they say there's four bodies of a Buddha. One, the Dharmakaya. There may be different explanations of this, but the way it's explained, the way I understand it is, there's the Dharmakaya, which is the Buddha's mind, the omniscient mind of the Buddha, which sees everything, knows everything, and so on. And then there's the nature body, which is the emptiness of the Buddha's mind. So we shouldn't think of body here as a physical body. It's the word kaya. So it's like I think of it as a different aspect of the Buddha. So there's the Dharmakaya, then there's the Svabhavakaya, which is the emptiness of the Buddha's mind. So those two are sometimes grouped together as the Dharmakaya. And then there's the other two are grouped together as the Rupakaya, or form bodies. There's the Sambhogakaya, the form that the Buddha takes to teach higher level bodhisattvas, Arya bodhisattvas, but ordinary beings can't see that. And then there's the Nirmanakaya, which is the form that any ordinary beings can see. So the Buddha, when the Buddha came into this world and was teaching, that was the Nirmanakaya, the supreme emanation body. So it's just like a manifestation or an emanation of the Buddha's mind in a form that can be seen by ordinary beings. But still, all four of these are like different aspects of Buddha, of enlightened, Buddha's existence as an enlightened being. So they're all considered Buddhas, but different.
But do you think that when Nirmanakaya comes and like acts more or less like a person, like maybe His Holiness Dalai Lama, and seemingly relates to us in that way, that from their perspective, if they are completely enlightened, they wouldn't be like remembering in the sense that we remember, or like having all of these mental activities. Wouldn't it be more like, from their perspective, they're just in the completely inconceivable state of Dharmakaya, and then spontaneously all this activity manifests, like, oh, once I was a prince and I gave my body to the tigers.
I'm not quite sure what you're saying. Are you saying that a manifestation of the Buddha wouldn't have all the memories, all the knowledge that the Buddha's mind has?
They would have from their perspective, at least when I think about knowing things, then I think in terms of, in a very limited way. I think, oh, I can know this much about my past, and I can even conceive of knowing other people's past, all of these like countable objects. But if we're talking about infinite knowledge objects, knowing them all simultaneously throughout infinite time, being in that state, it wouldn't be, it doesn't make sense to me then to think about. But then at this point in time, I then remembered this thing, because from the perspective of the Buddha, it's so vast and inconceivable. Am I making sense at all?
I mean, again, it's difficult to really understand what it's like to have a Buddha's mind, what a Buddha's mind is really like. But they say that every moment, every single moment, every single second, a Buddha's mind is fully aware of all phenomena. It's not necessary at one point in time they think about this, and at another point in time they think about that, and so on. But it's all the knowledge, all the experiences, all phenomena are there all the time, every minute, every second.
Yeah, this is exactly what I
mean. Yeah.
So then
but when you try to figure that out, try to imagine what that would be like. It's your mind could explode.
Contradiction to emptiness, though.
Why?
If it's encompassing all phenomena at all the same time and all knowing, and isn't that kind of the opposite of what emptiness should be?
Why?
I don't know. I'm asking.
No, because they say, well, there's these two truths. There's conventional truth and there's ultimate truth, which is emptiness. And both of those things exist. Both conventional truths and ultimate truths exist. And they exist simultaneously. They exist compatibly in a what's the word? Non-contradictory way. They don't contradict each other. They're compatible. So they say a Buddha's mind sees all conventional truths and all ultimate truths, emptinesses at the same time. So there's no contradiction there. So the Buddha would see the cup plus the emptiness of the cup at the same time. No other being is able to do that. You know, like we ordinary beings we see conventional things, and yogis, when they're in single-pointed meditation on emptiness, see emptiness, but they can't see conventional things at the same time that they see emptiness. So you kind of have to go back and forth. But only a Buddha is able to see both conventional and ultimate truths at the same time. So it's a pretty mind-blowing mind.
Directly realize. That's,
Hmm?
I think the definition of directly realizing
Yeah.
emptiness is different from just seeing. We also just think it's the power of the eye, looking eye.
Yeah. So I just have one more slide, and then we could do maybe a little bit of meditation. So again, this is just part of the summary. So this is summarizing the conventional nature of the mind, the never-ceasing, moment-to-moment event of arising and engaging that constitutes experience, then refers to the arising of a sight and merely seeing it, the arising of a sound and merely hearing it, the arising of a thought and merely thinking it, the arising of an emotion and merely feeling it, and so on. This is the conventional nature of mind. It gives rise to things and apprehends them. And its deepest nature is its voidness. Alex likes to use the word voidness rather than emptiness, but it's the same thing. Namely, that it is devoid of existing in any impossible manner, from being a physical entity up to involving a solid, concrete subject, content, or experience. So this is just giving us some little understanding of what the mind is. And I thought maybe it would be nice to try to do some meditation for a bit of time. Maybe we could turn this off.
I mean, this is enough for the rest of our life, isn't it? So,
But the mind is so important in meditation. It's that which meditates, right? Mind is the sort of tool for meditation, that which meditates. And then what we're trying to understand in meditation is our mind. So just for about 10 minutes now. First, I'm going to ring the gong, and just be aware of the sound of the gong, and try to understand that there are actually two things. There's the sound, which is an object. It's the object. And then there's the mind that knows or experiences or is aware of the sound. So those two they're actually said to be non-dual. That's one thing I forgot to mention, but it's in Alex's article. It said that mind and its object are non-dual, but non-dual, that doesn't mean they are the same thing, because mind is one thing, the object, like sound, is another thing. They are two things, but the meaning of saying they are non-dual is that they occur together. They're kind of inseparable. They come together in one package. You can't have mind without an object, and you also can't have an object without a mind. So they kind of depend on each other, and they occur together simultaneously. So there are two things there. There's the sound of the gong, and the mind knowing the sound. So just try to be aware of that. Maybe try to recognize those two different things. And then just continue after the sound has faded away. Just continue to try to be aware of the mind and its objects. So there may be other sounds that you hear, or there may be thoughts that come up, or you may feel sensations in your body. So just pay attention moment by moment to whatever's happening in your experience, and try to be aware that the mind is changing all the time, moment by moment. There's different moments of mind, different events of mind arising, experiencing its object, and then passing. Are there any questions? I have a bit of time left.
I don't know how much I have.
Yeah, that's another big topic. But just basically they explain 3 different levels of the mind: gross, subtle, and very subtle. So the gross level of the mind includes our sensory experiences, seeing, hearing, and so forth, the 5 senses, and our thoughts. Most of our thoughts, most are gross thoughts. So those constitute the gross level of mind. And then there's the subtle level of mind, which it's not that clear what the subtle level of mind is, except when they explain the death process. During the process of dying, you've heard that explanation, the 8 stages of the death process. So the gross level of mind absorbs gradually over the first 4 stages. And then the 5th, 6th, and 7th stage, the mind is in the subtle level, and they just describe it in terms of these white, red, and dark kind of visions. And they say during that time, there's these 80 types of conceptions that are gradually, these are some like very basic conceptions. I don't fully understand them, but they say those gradually dissolve over the 5th through the 7th stages. And then finally, all of those levels of mind have absorbed. And in the 8th stage of the death process, one is in the subtlest level of mind, which is the clear light mind. And that is like beyond, it's totally non-conceptual. But actually, that becomes problematic when you get to Tantra. Explain this. It seems like there could still be some conceptual aspect of the very subtle level of mind. That's a complicated thing. Anyway, but they say that's the most subtle and most pure level of mind that we could experience. And they say we do experience it sometimes during our life. Like they say, every time we go to sleep, our mind actually goes through these 8 stages. So, but most of us are not aware. We don't really notice what's going on. And other times as well, fainting, yawning, sneezing, orgasm. So those are experiences that ordinary people go through, and they say actually our mind actually goes through the 8 stages very quickly during those times. But it's only at the time of death that the mind, they say it's fully qualified clear light is experienced at the time of death. And so I mean, I can't really explain this from experience. It's just what they say in the text. But they say it's this very subtle level of mind, the very subtle clear light mind, that actually makes the bridge or transmigrates from one life to the next. You know, it's like the mind gets down to that very subtle level, and then that is what exits the body, leaves the body, and then starts anew in a new body.
This is similar to the Alaya.
Well, the Prasangika doesn't explain the Alaya. That's explained in the Chittamatra. And Prasangika says that there's no such thing as the Alaya. But yeah, the Chittamatra school, who do believe in the Alaya, they say that it's the Alaya that transmigrates from
Whereas
one
the
life to the
karmic
next.
seeds stored.
Stores the karmic
No, but
seeds.
from
Yeah.
the point of view of the Prasangika.
They say it's stored on the mere eye. Yeah, because yeah, I mean, when you're just talking in terms of the different schools, they don't talk about the clear light mind. So yeah, the Prasangika would say where the karmic seeds are stored is the mere eye. It's the mere eye that carries the karmic seeds from one life to another. But of course, you know, the mere eye is a merely labeled eye. It has to have a basis on which it's labeled. Okay, it's well, mainly it would be the mental consciousness, because the other aggregates, the other kinds of consciousness dissolve. So it's only the mental consciousness
And
that
then you have
passes
a
away.
mental consciousness that is mere knowing, that carries the karmic seeds. And
Yeah,
that's the alignment.
yeah. But I think they say the mere eye just to stop us from grasping it. You know, the mental consciousness being the real me. Yeah. But I think usually they don't mix up, like when they're talking about Buddhist philosophy and the different schools and so forth, they don't usually bring in the tantric explanation. They try to keep those things separate. But the Dalai Lama tends to do when he gives even public talks. I mean, he talks about the clear light mind in front of hundreds of thousands of people. So we're going to have to stop here. So for next week, I'll move on to the next article in the notes is some selections from Geshe Rapton's book called Mind and Its Functions. And so I pulled out some material from that book, and some of it is similar to what Alex was talking about, the nature of the mind, but then mainly what I want to focus on is these two main types of mind, perception and conception, because that's really important to understand the two main types of experiences that we have. So if you have time to start reading that before next week, that would be helpful. Do you find it helpful to have a slide?
Yes.
Just to have some things up there to focus on, and it stays in the mind.
Referring to the notes, and I'm looking through my notes. Where's the notes? And you've already
Your notes
spoken
are
about it.
Yeah, your notes are
already
super helpful. So I mean,
to have them there is.
Yeah, I'm just putting the main points up there, but not every single word.
Because if I'm reading the notes that you've written and you're concurrently explaining them, then I can't follow.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think this is
Because
very.
I'm also not going word by word. I'm just
Yeah.
the main points. Okay, so let's finish by dedicating the merit of our session here tonight. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Thank you.